What we'd like to do now is we're going to have an opportunity for Dr. Paul to answer some questions. We're going to begin with folks from the press that are here today. If anybody from the press has a question that they'd like to ask the Congressman, please raise your hand, let me know, and this is going to be your opportunity to do that. All right, how about the rest of the audience? Would anybody... Oh, there you go. There's a bunch of questions. How about this young man right here? And please speak up. The fan up here is kind of noisy. Shout it out for us.
If you could appoint the next chairman of the Federal Reserve, who would it be?
Appointing the next chairman of the Federal Reserve is irrelevant. Because it's the system that is bad. And even though I challenged Bernanke and Greenspan on a few occasions, they're not my target. You know, it's nobody, and sort of like what I was talking about before, nobody knows how to run your life. And nobody knows what the money supply is supposed to be. And nobody knows what the interest rate should be. So it's the system. I mean, I could appoint somebody that's a free market person, but he probably wouldn't take the job because he would know that he's not supposed to do it. But you know, somebody that I admire because he really understands this could either be Secretary of Treasury or in the Federal Reserve, and that would be Jim Grant. Some of you may not have heard, but he knows Austrian economics, and he would be trusted not to pretend to know what the interest rates would be. But he's probably also the one that probably wouldn't take the job either. But it's the system. It's the system of money which is completely contradictory to commodity money, which is what I think we need. I'll let you go.
Well, this gentleman with the purple tie.
Hi, my name is Carl, and I'm a certified public accountant. I spend the majority of my time preparing personal and individual tax returns. However, I support you and your position on ending the Federal Reserve and the term of the IRS. So my question to you is this: how do we go about ending the Federal Reserve? Do we have to wait for Congress to repeal the Federal Reserve Act? Could the President lawfully sign an executive order ending the Federal Reserve Charter? Or finally, could we, the people of this great republic, take individual actions to end the Federal Reserve?
Good question. The president couldn't do it with, or at least I as president wouldn't do it as an executive order because it was a law that was passed, even though it's unconstitutional. I could conceive of challenging it in the courts, but the courts have always been favorable to, you know, anytime we've challenged anything in court, central banking has always, been supported. In what I've written, and since the early 80s being on the Gold Commission, my approach to it is not to close the Fed down in one day because it would be chaotic, because we are dependent. But what I would legalize is competition. Today, if you as an individual want to compete and you say, well, the Constitution says gold and silver, I'm going to take my gold coins and silver coins and we're going to go out and start trading with gold and silver. And I don't know, we've heard the case just recently, somebody tried it, went to prison. You know, and somebody else tried to pay in silver dollars, old silver dollars, because on the books they're still legal tender. He went to prison too. So it's a big problem. But if we had a sensible country that didn't want to turn the Fed down in one day and didn't want to keep sending people to prison, what I would do is introduce, I have legislation introduced now, but I would get legislation passed where they would legalize competition. It's sort of like the post office. The post office is permittable. That's more permitted than, of course, the Federal Reserve. But if you don't like the post office, you don't need to close the post office down one day. Just legalize competition in first-class mail and see what happens. But on competing currencies, it means that the legal tender laws would have to be changed. But if you wanted to do it, let's say we have rampant inflation like I expect even next year, if you wanted to deal in a gold or silver currency, especially a savings account in your bank, you'd have to take taxes off it. Because if you go to the bank and you want to buy or cash in some money for quarters, you don't get taxed. But if you take your money to a coin dealer, you have to pay sales tax, and then you pay. And then if the value of the dollar goes down and the nominal value of your gold or silver goes up, you have to pay a capital gains tax. So that's not fair. So I would want to legalize the competition. And actually this idea has made some traction in Mexico, because their middle class has been wiped out quite a few times, and that is really what happens. That's a characteristic of runaway inflation. The middle class gets wiped out. But down there, you can save in silver. Our laws today, the current laws that have not been repealed, says that a dollar is 371 1/4 grains of silver, but that's never been repealed. There's not even a law in the book that tells you that Federal Reserve notes are dollars, and that is what has to be done. But what I think could happen if we have chaos in the economy, which is possible, and people are scurrying around, and at least for a short period of time, I think people will use gold and silver, and it will be a form of nullification, not official nullification, but if they have a currency like in Zimbabwe or Germany, I hope it never gets that bad, but it's conceivable that it would get that bad, and people should and probably will, and I think that's a lot of reasons why people do go and buy gold and silver coins, just for the fact that it's just not a few of us that understand what's happening in the monetary system.
Congressman Paul, Matt Jaffe at ABC News. I just got a question for you. This is one of your campaign T-shirts, and it's made in El Salvador. And I didn't know if you were aware of that, and if you weren't aware of it, maybe you was planning to change that.
No, I wasn't aware of it, but I wouldn't change it. That would reject the whole idea. Let's say that shirt, let's say it's a shirt, not a campaign shirt, but let's say it's a shirt for $3, and if it were made here, it would be $10. So do you want a poor person to pay $10 all the time? No, you want the market. First, every individual has a right to spend the money the way they want. It's their money. I don't want to tell people. And besides, if you say, nothing can be made, so we're going to regulate the prices from imported goods. So what about a poor person can get tennis shoes for $10? If you buy them in the United States, they cost $100. That wouldn't be morally right. It wouldn't be good economic policy. So I would argue the case that the market should determine it.
The lobbyist system in Washington, do you think it's serving us well, or is it ruining our country?
What?
The lobbyists.
The lobbyists. Oh, that's a good question. He asked about whether the lobbyists serve our interests. And the lobbyists are a big problem, but I don't see them as a problem the way a lot of other people see it, like we need more laws to regulate lobbyists. If you've ever called up your state representative and you call them up and say, I want to see you. I want you to look at my views on schools or guns or something like that. You become a lobbyist. Lobbying is petitioning, and the First Amendment protects petitioning. So I don't want to regulate petitioners. I don't want to ever say that we'll interfere. You say, yeah, but people with the money, they control things, which there is some truth to that. But the problem there is that government is doing too much. They're acting outside the law, and therefore they have too much to offer, and the special interests do spend the money. So you need a different system of government, where the government has nothing to offer in that sense other than offering you more freedom. But if we had only people of high integrity in Washington, they wouldn't yield to that. They wouldn't listen to the lobbyists. They say, look, I'm not going to listen to you. And quite frankly, it's under the law today. If you're a lobbyist and you're special interests, you're allowed to donate to me. But I don't get any money from the lobbyists because they know what my positions are. So it's a big difference. So lobbying is a big problem, but that is a symptom of the size of government, and we're too much involved and too many favors can be passed out. And we must be very careful, never, in our attempts to straighten out the messes that we're in, that we take away your freedom. And so we want to always protect your right to petition the government. And if you're a right to life or pro-Second Amendment, you don't want to restrict somebody else because they're lobbying for the wrong thing. It's the principle of petitioning that we have to protect.
Hey, Dr. Paul, my name is Saul. I've been a here since the last campaign. And I know you said you would immediately refuse them. My question for you is, things like abolishing the IRS and the Department of Education, mentioned kind of some of the long-term goals. Is that something that can be accomplished in your first 4 years, or will that take 4 years of your office?
Well, I'd like to do it very quickly. But in the midst of a revamping of a crisis, when a country is totally bankrupt, that would give you an opportunity to say, this is the way it's going to be, because you can't pay all the employees, and you could have, very big changes. But no, you could have. I always have priorities in my mind on what we could do if we were going to work our way out of it, and I think the easiest place to cut is overseas. You can save a lot of money. And probably the place where I want to cut the least would be medical care for children and the elderly. And even though technically you don't have to have it, it wasn't meant to be, but to attack that makes no political sense, and you wouldn't have to if you're willing to cut the other. But I would put Department of Education and Department of Agriculture and Department of Energy and Department of Commerce and Department of Homeland Security, so many other things where they accomplishes nothing, and work on it as fast as possible. But a lot of those, to get rid of them completely, you would probably you'd probably have to get legislation passed on that if it was made. And the other one I mentioned earlier is challenge some of these things in court and say this is unconstitutional. We shouldn't continue this program, and try to get rid of it that way.
We're going to have time for 2 more questions, and then what we'll do after that, if we could form a line, Congressman will stand at that door, have a chance to greet everybody, get an autograph. If you have a question you didn't get a chance to ask, you'll have a chance on your way out of the room. Want to let everybody know you will have your opportunity, and make sure you get a yard sign on your way out too, and stop at the table right outside the door. Get signed up to get to Ames. Get more information. There's campaign materials over on the table over on that wall too, and I'll see you in Ames. Let's do 2 more questions. I'd like to ask this gentleman right here.
You mentioned a couple of times today that you stood in opposition to many others in the legislature. You've introduced some novel ideas. Others have described your ideas, I think today, as visionary, unique. What assurances do we have that you can accomplish these things as a leader in Washington as a unique individual? How can we know that these things are actually going to happen if we send you to the White House?
Well, there's no way to absolutely know that. But one thing you could know is that I won't change my mind in making every single effort to do it. In many ways, it does take a consensus. The people have to decide what the role of government should be. But what I would continue to do as the country gets into more trouble, the more open they're going to be to these views, and that's where I think we're making tremendous progress. But no, it would take a lot of support. People vote when basically on their own self-interest, which is okay, because but if it's only because it's in their self-interest because they think they're going to steal from their neighbors through their congressman who's going to tax their neighbor for the stuff they want, that is bad. But people vote in their best interest. And my job as a president or a congressman, and the job that you have because you're activist, is to convince people that it is in their best interest to opt out for less government and not think that big government is your solution.
One more there, the gentleman in the button-down shirt.
Congressman Paul, in the 70s, I don't remember what year, an executive order closed the gold desk at the Federal Reserve banks. As a follow-up to this gentleman's question, could an executive order reopen those gold desks where we are allowed to exchange our Federal Reserve notes for either as silver or gold certificates or bullion? Yeah. And if so, how far would that go to reestablishing a commodity standard? What else would be necessary to actually form or standardize a gold standard for?
Well, an executive order could do it, but it wouldn't accomplish what you want, because what we were doing in 1971 when the gold window was closed is that we just said that foreigners no longer could put $35 down and get an ounce of gold because they were running out of gold. Nixon said we have to quit doing that. because you couldn't do it at $35 an ounce. You can't do it at $300 an ounce. You can't do it at $1,000 because gold is selling at $1,600. So the closest thing you could come to is essentially what we have, and that is the gold can be bought and sold at $1,600 plus dollars. But we're not selling the government gold, and I have pursued this a bit. Matter of fact, I pulled this up, called it up to Bernanke the other day about why they hold gold, and if they are true that gold is not money, why don't they just sell the gold? So in your case, you say yes, and I wouldn't really be opposed to that, because I believe that the market, if you allow the market to work, the market could pick up competing currencies, gold, silver, a basket of commodities or whatever. Gold, though, is the ultimate test of 6,000 years. But if you wanted to have a government gold standard and work real hard to keep the integrity of the government such where they honor this, you would have to have some legislation to do that. But simply reversing that executive orders wouldn't be enough.
All right, thanks everybody for coming out. Get a sign on your way out. Get signed up to go to Ames. Bring friends and family. The way we help Ron Paul win in Ames is how many people we bring with us to Ames to help magnify the vote. Thanks again for coming out today. This is your opportunity to meet the Congressman, and I hope to see you all in Ames August 13th. Thanks again.
I want to add one more.
Take the mic, Drew.
Talking microphone. We didn't come here to entertain ourselves. We didn't come here to be philosophically enlightened. We come here to have an impact on our nation and on our country. That's only going to happen if we act. We must act on our knowledge. That's going to happen on August 13th. And it's in your area of responsibility of citizenship to make that happen. You alone will make that happen. Do it.